My husband's family had no idea I was sitting on a fortune, but his mother walked through my front door like she already owned it. The lawyer placed a heavy manila folder on my granite countertop, his gaze measuring me like I was a suspect in a crime I hadn't committed yet. My client is under the impression that you have a duty to contribute to the family's financial well-being, he stated. Across from him sat my mother-in-law, Patricia. A faint, practiced smile played on her lips. It was the same warm expression she had worn at my wedding just 6 days ago. But now, seeing it in the harsh light of my kitchen, that smile felt predatory. I looked at the folder, then met Patricia's cool gaze. "You brought a lawyer to my home to ask me for money," I said, my voice quiet but steady. She didn't flinch. "Not just money, Sophia. It's about family resources." My pulse hammered in my ears, but I kept my composure. They had no concept of the truth. They didn't know the full extent of my net worth, nor did they suspect the instructions my father had left for this very scenario. "My name is Sophia Zoe. I'm a 32-year-old captain in the United States Army." Until that morning, I had been striving to believe that marrying Daniel had been the right decision. 6 days earlier, I had stood beside him in a quaint chapel, surrounded by loved ones. My father was noticeably absent. General Robert Zoe had been gone for nearly a year. A retired 4-star general with over 40 years of service, he was a figure of discipline and integrity. But to me, he was just Dad. He taught me how to press a uniform, how to keep my word, and how to stay calm when others lost their composure. One lesson he emphasized more than any other: never reveal your full hand until you understand what the other person values. I never truly grasped his meaning until that morning. Daniel knew my father had left me an inheritance. He was aware of properties and investment portfolios. I had mentioned that Dad had arranged things for my future. However, I had never revealed the actual figure. The number was a staggering $70 million. It was the culmination of decades of prudent investment, family holdings, and assets my father had safeguarded. The inheritance was structured within a trust, managed by attorneys my father trusted implicitly. He had left explicit directives. The money was mine, exclusively. Not Daniel's, not his mother's, and certainly not to be merged with the family finances. I had concealed the amount to see if my future husband would love me regardless of my wealth. During the first year of our relationship, Daniel gave me every reason to believe he would. He never pried into my earnings. He never resented my military schedule. When I was called away for training, he would wake early to bring me coffee and tell me how proud he was. That was the man I fell in love with. His mother was a different story. Patricia was charming in public, but beneath her graceful demeanor, I sensed a calculating nature. She would ask seemingly harmless questions about my father's investments and the family home. I would deflect, and Daniel would often change the subject. So when we married, I believed my secret was secure. But just 6 days after our wedding, the doorbell rang. Patricia stood there, accompanied by a man in an expensive dark suit, clutching a leather briefcase. "Good morning, Sophia," she chirped. "This is my attorney," she announced. My stomach clenched.
"Why?"
"We need to discuss your inheritance." I stared at her in disbelief as she settled at my kitchen table. The attorney opened his briefcase. "Let me be straightforward," he began. "Your marriage introduces certain financial implications." Patricia leaned forward. "Your father was a man of influence. He understood family obligations." I almost scoffed. "My father understood boundaries," I retorted. Her smile vanished. "Sophia, Daniel is your husband. What you have should benefit the family you married into." "No," I said firmly. "That's not how inheritance law works." The attorney slid a document across the table. It contained detailed information about my trust, details only a handful of people should have known. My mouth went dry. How did they get this information? Neither of them answered. I looked at Patricia, then at the attorney. "Did Daniel tell you about this?" I asked. Patricia smiled again. "Daniel doesn't need to tell me everything," she said smoothly. A chilling realization washed over me. I grabbed my phone and called my husband. He answered on the third ring. "Daniel," I said, "your mother is here with a lawyer." There was silence. Not shock, but silence. Then a quiet whisper. "What?" I closed my eyes. She's asking me to sign papers regarding my inheritance. Another lengthy pause. And in that pause, I understood something far more painful than the lawyer or the documents.
Daniel knew about it.
Perhaps not every detail, but he was aware. Sophia, maybe we should talk about this tonight, he finally managed. I looked at Patricia, who was studying my reaction intently. She had arrived prepared. In that moment, my father's ultimate warning resonated with clarity. Never react in anger, never reveal your knowledge, and never show your adversary the full battlefield. I opened my eyes. Okay, Daniel, I said calmly. We'll talk when you get home. I ended the call. For the first time since my wedding, I wasn't thinking like a spouse. I was thinking like my father's daughter. I knew my next move was critical. By the time Daniel arrived home, Patricia and her attorney were gone. I had spent the afternoon examining every page of the document without signing anything. The more I read, the more disturbed I became. The agreement would have granted Daniel access to financial data, created joint control over assets, and given his family leverage to argue the money should be used for their obligations. Once signed, regaining control would be a legal nightmare. I heard the garage door open. A moment later, Daniel walked into the kitchen. He looked tired or guilty. I couldn't tell which. You knew they were coming, didn't you? He stopped. I knew my mom wanted to talk to you. That wasn't my question. He looked down. I knew she was upset. Daniel, I said. He finally met my gaze.
Yes.
The admission was quiet, but it hit like a blow. I pushed the documents across the table. I didn't know she'd bring a lawyer, but you knew she was going to ask about my inheritance. He hesitated.
Yes.
I leaned back in my chair. When did you find out? A few weeks ago. My chest tightened.
How?
My mother heard something from one of your father's old associates. I stared at him. That doesn't make sense.
Why?
Because the amount was confidential. He glanced away. You knew the amount, didn't you? I knew your father had left you money. How much, Daniel? He didn't answer. I stood up. Sophia, I don't remember the exact number. I almost laughed. You don't remember hearing about $70 million?
His face changed.
He knew the number. And suddenly, the last few weeks of our marriage appeared in a different light. The questions about buying a bigger house, his mother asking if I'd leave the army, they all felt like pieces of a larger puzzle. Did you tell your mother the amount? I demanded.
No.
Did you tell her anything? Daniel rubbed his forehead. I might have mentioned that your father left you more than we expected. I closed my eyes. More than we expected. He had turned my inheritance into something that belonged to both of us.
We?
I echoed. What do you mean, we expected?
He looked at me. I didn't mean it that way.
How did you mean it? He couldn't answer. I walked toward the window. Everything had changed. I never told you the amount, I said. I know. Why didn't you ask? Because I didn't care. I turned to face him. Then why is your mother here, trying to get me to sign away access to it? He looked ashamed. I didn't ask her to do that. But you didn't stop her. He sat down heavily. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in his expression. Sophia, my family is struggling, he said. My parents have huge debts. My mother thinks your inheritance could solve everything. She thinks families help each other. That's not what this is. I know, I said quietly. No, Daniel, you don't. Your mother didn't come here to welcome me. She came here 6 days after our wedding, with a lawyer and confidential information. He looked down. I know. Then tell me how she got that information. He was silent. The silence stretched long enough for me to understand he either knew or had a very good idea. I sat across from him. Daniel, I need the truth. He swallowed hard. My mother has been asking questions. What kind? About your father's estate.
When? Before the wedding.
My heart sank. How long? Maybe 2 months. 2 months. While I had been planning our wedding, his mother had been investigating my inheritance. Did you know? I pressed. At first, I thought she was just curious, then I realized she wasn't. What did you do? I told her to leave it alone.
Did she? No.
I stood up again. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was afraid. The answer stopped me. Afraid of what? Losing you. I looked at him for a long moment. You should have been more afraid of losing my trust. He lowered his eyes. That night, I didn't sleep beside him. I took a blanket to the guest room. Instead of crying, I did what my father had taught me. Separate facts from feelings. Fact 1. Daniel knew about the inheritance. Fact 2. His mother knew the amount. Fact 3. A lawyer had prepared documents. Fact 4. Someone had obtained confidential trust information. Fact 5. Daniel was not telling me everything. The next morning, I called my father's estate attorney, Robert Hayes. He had represented my father for over 15 years. When he answered, I didn't waste time. Robert, someone has information about my trust. There was a pause. What kind of information? The amount, the structure, detailed assets. His voice became serious. Did you disclose anything to your husband?
No.
Then we have a problem. I need you to come to my office. I drove into Washington that morning. Robert closed the blinds before speaking. Someone attempted to access your trust records last month.
I stared at him. Who?
We don't know for certain. Then how did you know? Because the request came through a third party using information connected to your husband. My stomach dropped.
Daniel?
We can't say he personally made the request, but someone used his credentials. Robert opened a file and removed a sealed envelope. This was left by your father. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Robert looked at me. He gave me strict instructions. I was not to deliver this unless someone attempted to interfere with your inheritance. My fingers trembled as I reached for the envelope. For 11 months, I had avoided anything that made his death feel real. But now I understood my father had left me a plan. I broke the seal with my thumb. My father's handwriting was unmistakable. I finally opened it. Sophia, if you're reading this, someone has tried to access what I left you. I stopped breathing. Do not confront them until you understand their objective. My father knew me too well. He knew I'd want answers immediately. Instead, he was telling me to wait and think. I kept reading. The money is not the important part. The people who reveal themselves because of it are. Dad never cared much about money. He cared about character. The letter continued. I chose you as the sole beneficiary because you have demonstrated restraint. Then came the sentence that made my hands tremble. If someone tries to convince you that marriage automatically gives them control over this inheritance, remember that inheritance and marital property are not the same. Get independent legal advice before signing anything. I looked up at Robert. He knew. Robert nodded. Your father never gave me a name, but he was concerned about people around you. I looked back at the letter. Sophia, you will be tempted to think you can solve this by giving them enough money to make the problem disappear.
Don't.
Once you pay someone who believes they are entitled to your wealth, there will always be another demand. I folded the letter slowly, and for the first time since my father's death, I cried. Not out of fear, but because I missed him. Robert handed me a tissue. He loved you very much, he said. I know, I replied. Show me the records. Robert opened another folder. Inside were copies of several inquiries about my trust. One was made through a property company, attached to a name, Family Holdings. I stared at it. That's Patricia's family company. Robert nodded. The company has been struggling. How badly? Robert slid another document toward me. Millions in debt, outstanding loans, tax liens, a pending foreclosure.
How long?
Several years. Daniel had never told me. Neither had Patricia. Robert continued. There's something else. He handed me a printed email. The writer discussed convincing me to merge my assets with marital finances after the wedding. One sentence stood out. Once she's married, she'll be more emotionally vulnerable to pressure from her husband. My hands went numb. Does Daniel know about it?
I don't know.
I closed my eyes. I wanted desperately to believe he didn't, because despite everything, I still loved him. That was the most painful part. I drove home that afternoon without calling him. When I walked through the front door, Daniel was sitting on the couch. He stood immediately. Where were you? At my attorney's office.
Why?
Because your mother brought a lawyer into our home. I know. No, you don't. I placed my purse on the table. Did you, or your mother, try to access my trust?
No.
Did you give anyone information about my inheritance?
No.
Did you know your family has millions in debt? He stared at me. I knew about my parents' financial problems. And you still let your mother come here asking for my money. I didn't know what she planned to do. You knew enough. He ran both hands through his hair. I was trying to protect everyone. Everyone except me. He stepped closer. I love you. I wanted to believe him, but love wasn't enough anymore. Then tell me the truth. He looked down. My mother has been talking about your inheritance for weeks. How much does she want? He didn't answer. How much, Daniel?
He looked at me.
Maybe a few million. The words hit me harder than a shout. A few million, as if it were nothing. As if my life had become a bank account. How much did your mother tell you she needed? About 4 million. You signed an agreement without knowing the amount? He looked away. I nodded slowly. That's the problem, Daniel. You weren't just manipulated by your mother. You participated. Tears filled his eyes. I know. For the first time, he didn't defend himself.
He just sat there.
And somehow that made the betrayal feel more real. Then his phone rang. It's my mother, he said. Answer it, I told him. Put it on speaker. He answered. Mom? Patricia's voice came through. Did she sign?
Daniel looked at me. No.
Then you need to make her understand what happens if she doesn't cooperate. I reached for the phone. I'm listening. Silence. Sophia? Yes. Her voice changed. You shouldn't be listening to private family conversations. You called my husband about my money because you're being unreasonable. No, I'm being careful. You don't understand what your father would have wanted. That sentence made me angry. You didn't know my father, I said. I knew his reputation. You knew nothing about him. She became defensive. Your father was a powerful man. He understood that families support one another. My father also believed people should earn what they receive. She hung up. Daniel stared at the phone. That's the last time she uses you to speak to me, I said. You need to decide something.
What?
Your mother or our marriage. His face crumpled. He sat quietly for a long time. Finally, he said, I'll tell her no. I wanted to believe him, but words weren't enough anymore. The following week, our attorneys arranged mediation. Patricia arrived with her lawyer. Daniel arrived alone. That small detail told me something had changed. The mediator explained that the purpose was to establish boundaries. Patricia accused me of turning her son against her. I didn't respond. Robert placed the documents on the table, emails, financial agreements, the trust inquiry. The mediator read everything carefully. Then she looked at Patricia. Why was this agreement prepared before the marriage? Patricia shifted in her chair. It was simply a precaution. Why was Miss Zoe's inheritance referenced? She was going to become part of our family. The mediator looked at Daniel. Did you sign this?
Yes.
Did your wife know about it before the wedding?
No.
The room became silent.
Daniel looked at me.
I was wrong. I believed him. Not because of the words, but because for the first time, he was willing to say them in front of everyone. Patricia's expression hardened. This is ridiculous. She has $70 million, and you're all acting as though she is the victim. I looked at her. I never asked you for anything. I didn't take your house, your business, or your son's money. You came after mine. No one spoke. And in that silence, I finally understood what my father had meant. The money hadn't changed anyone. It had simply removed the mask. Months later, I realized the hardest part had not been protecting the 70 million. It had been deciding what to do with the people who had tried to take it. The mediation ended without Patricia receiving $1. My inheritance remained legally separate. Daniel moved into a small apartment. We were still married, but separated. He stopped making excuses for his mother. A few weeks later, Daniel called me. My mother wants me to challenge the trust, he said. Are you going to?
No.
I told her I'm done. Why are you telling me? Because I should have told you everything before. I was afraid of my mother. Someone did get hurt, I replied. I know.
I'm sorry.
Over the next several months, Daniel separated his finances from his parents. He refused to co-sign another loan. He told Patricia my inheritance was not available to them. When she became angry, he handled it himself. I returned to my military duties. One afternoon, Robert called me about a proposal. My father's estate could fund a charitable foundation supporting military families and veterans. I created the Zoe Family Service Foundation. Part of the inheritance went towards scholarships and financial education programs. I learned something I wish someone had taught me earlier. Financial abuse doesn't always look like stealing your credit card. Sometimes it looks like a loving relative saying, "We're family." Sometimes it sounds like, "If you really loved us, you'd help." And sometimes it arrives wearing a suit and carrying a legal folder. A few months later, Daniel and I agreed to attend counseling. During our first session, our counselor asked us, "Do you want to save your marriage, or do you simply want to stop feeling guilty about ending it?" Finally, I said, "I want to know whether we can build something honest." Daniel nodded.
So do I.
We spent months learning how to talk about money without fear. We discussed boundaries and family expectations. Daniel kept showing up. He never asked me to forget what happened. He said, "I made my own choices." Patricia never apologized. Eventually, she stopped contacting me. One autumn afternoon, almost a year after she first appeared at my door, I drove to Arlington National Cemetery.
My father was buried there.
I wore my dress uniform. The cemetery was quiet. Leaves moved across the grass in the cold wind. I stood beside his grave for a long time. "Dad, you were right," I said. "The money didn't change people. It revealed them. But my father had taught me how to protect what he left me. Life had taught me how to decide who deserved another chance. The greatest revenge was refusing to become bitter. I protected myself, told the truth, and gave Daniel the chance to prove he could become a better man. Eventually, we renewed our vows. Before we exchanged rings, Daniel looked at me. "I don't deserve another chance because I apologized," he said. "I only deserve it if I spend the rest of my life earning your trust." I smiled. "Then let's start there." That was the real inheritance my father left me, not $70 million. He left me the courage to protect myself, the discipline to wait for the truth, and the wisdom to understand that forgiveness does not require surrender. If there is one thing I hope you take from my story, let it be this: protect what you've worked for, but don't let fear turn your heart into a fortress. Talk openly about money before marriage. Put important agreements in writing. Seek independent legal advice when something feels wrong. Never let anyone convince you that saying no makes you selfish. Sometimes no is how you protect your future. My father thought he was leaving me $70 million. But in the end, he left me something worth far more. He taught me how to recognize character when money was on the table. And that lesson has stayed with me every day since. If this story touched something in you, take a moment to think about the people in your life who have stood beside you when there was nothing to gain. If you know someone who needs this reminder about boundaries and trust, share the story with them. If you enjoy stories about courage, family, and second chances, consider subscribing to Zarabell Stories. Please like this video and comment below. What would you have done in Sophia's situation? We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for listening. Remember, protect your peace, value your character, and never confuse forgiveness with surrender.